Thank you very much today. My name is Benjamin Yankson. I am an assistant professor here at the College of Emergency Preparedness, Homeland Security, and Cybersecurity at UAlbany. And my talk today is going to focus on security and privacy in the midst of COVID-19. And what I'm really interested in giving this talk particular is to look at the global pandemic, COVID-19 as a global pandemic, not only being a serious health crisis that we're facing, but also the intricacies of the cybersecurity risk that it has exposed us to. What is interesting is that we fully aware, based on both literature and both findings, that in the midst of pandemic and disaster or any event that causes disorientation in society, the advent of crime seems to be appetizing, and as a result, we could see in this particular instances that we are interested in looking at what COVID-19 has really brought on in respect to cybersecurity. What I also want to kind of discuss is to look basically how COVID-19 in particular has exposed the overlap and the connection between cybersecurity and healthcare. And basically what we're looking at is public health. So what I want to kind of look at is the interdependencies of systems that support healthcare and the requirement to protect these systems as a measure of the degree of protection that we could give to this system and how this could have helped within this particular time with respect to COVID-19. Now, what has been happening right now has exposed what the underpinning of the essential of cybersecurity as a key measure to support our everyday living. As a result of that, most of the systems that we use to support our daily life depend on. So in instances where we have such a pandemic, how important it is for the systems that actually support our everyday life to be functioning and to have some level of integrity and be able to protect, for this system to be able, for us to be able to protect the data that are stored on these systems in order to really support. So if you look at in this particular instances, how are we able to protect the information systems that support healthcare delivery in such a way that patients could be treated in such a way that systems are going to be available. Now, what I wanted to do is to really galvanize this talk and focus on three major areas. One area being focusing on really cybercrime. And so what I mean by cybercrime in this particular context is to take a look at what COVID-19 has exposed with respect to the rise in online activity that's resulting in the excitement for cyber criminals to take advantage of the chaos. And one of the tenets of this particular, where I'm looking at for this particular talk, is to discuss how the dependencies that we have now with technology is fostering the desire for cyber criminals to really take advantage of events such as COVID-19, where everything is in chaos, people are nervous, and as a result, their own security is not taken into consideration. So in respect to cybercrime, we're looking at activities that are actually fostered or by a computer, or activities that are fostered, negative activities, or what we could talk about as crimes that are committed with the aid of a computer, or crimes that are committed that affect the computer, or in terms of looking at net crimes or crimes that are committed as a result of the use of the internet. Within the same area, what I'm interested is in safety. But before I move any forward, I want you to kind of put your thinking hat on. And what I want to discuss is, I want you to imagine it's 10 years after COVID-19. And you decided that you want to buy, for those of you that don't have homes, you decide that you want to buy your first home. And for those of you that have homes already, you decide that this is the perfect time to get the vacation home that have been looking for all along. So you give a call to your bank, and you call the bank and says, hey, this is Kwame, I'd like to set an appointment, and I would like to come in and discuss a major purchase that I want to make. So you walk into this bank, you sat down, you were excited, you put in an application to buy your home, and your banker looks at you and said, sir or madam, I'm very sorry you get denied, because the information that we have says that for the last 5 years, you've been living in California, you divorced, you remarried, you foreclosed 4 homes in your name, and your credit is destroyed. And what I want you to hold is, I want you to hold on that thought. And at the end of this particular presentation, what I want to show is how easy events such as COVID-19 or pandemic or stressful events such as pandemic could really allow people to be callous with the information that they have, and how that could be exploited, not only to something that could affect them today, but something that could affect them in the long run. Now, with you holding that in mind, what I want you to think about, secondly, is that I want you to imagine that I never know you from anywhere. I met you a couple of times on campus. I walk up to you and I said to you, hey, I could find where you spend most of your time or where you live. Right? I want you to hold on that thought also. But where I'm going in this particular instance is to look at what are some of the things that we have to be aware in terms of events such as COVID-19, and how we as society, how individuals and organizations could think about cybersecurity, or think about the system that we actually using now in our everyday lives, and how we could protect it, and how that could either result in either a financial injury to you in the long run, or in some cases could result in some form of injury, that's example such as reputational injury, and could affect your day-to-day operation. So I want to also think about safety of how this something like COVID-19 could result in. The second bucket that I wanted to kind of take a look at it is with the issue of surveillance. What I want to look at is how has COVID-19 allowed us to forego some of our privacy controls that we have? How has it made it so easy for people to say okay to things that are not okay? And in instances where people in the past would have had resistance, and because of such an event, people are okay in things. So an example would be in this particular instance that everybody here is asked to use a piece of software, and majority of people do not go and read what are the privacy policies for that particular software that we'll be using. And so what I'm also interested in discussing with you is what are the post-COVID-19 privacy implications that we have to deal with, and are we going to have any regrets on allowing such mass surveillance? And here also we could discuss not only the interest of nation states, such as what we've seen both in Taiwan and we've seen also in other parts of the world, such as Singapore, in using technology to surveil their people. Tangent to that is to think about not only nation states, but also to think about companies that have now privilege to provide you services, the companies that you work for that have privilege to provide you services at your home to allow you to continue to work whilst we go into COVID-19. What kind of monitoring technology are there, and what are some of the things that we should be worried about? And the second part of this particular bucket is to look at what are the legal and ethical challenges that we face in the United States or in the Five Eyes countries with respect to, are these things going to be down the road be challenged, and are we giving too much of our rights that we have to allow such surveillance to proceed? The last bucket, which is really of interest to me, is to look at information systems and security readiness of companies. A lot of organizations don't really, in their business continuity plan, and from both field as a practitioner and as a researcher, couldn't have really sat down and planned for such events where they're going to be in a situation where there's a lot of requirement to work from home. And so how are organizations preparing for readiness for events such as COVID-19, and what is the dependencies that we have in respect to exactly information systems, and how do we in the future think about ways to put into consideration structures that allow us to organizations to really plan for events such as COVID-19, and how the information systems that support the day-to-day activities could be protected. So these are the three major focus areas that I want to discuss with you on this particular talk. And so before we got to COVID-19, we have had major events. We have had Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, And all of them encompasses, we've seen within the cybersecurity field, the rise in certain level of attack, especially fraudulent attack, that exploits the current vulnerabilities of people or the current goodness of people to exploit money from them. So you get an email that tries to solicit information from you or get you to give up certain amount of dollars to a particular organization. But what has changed with COVID-19 is the impact on organizational wide, or the impact on the country as a whole, and major countries that are really experiencing experiencing hotspot with COVID-19. So what have changed is of interest, remote work or work from home, remote learning and remote play, and the concept of social distancing. And so, and these particular activities has fostered itself to really a higher engagement of technology, which means that people that in their day-to-day will go to work, come home, and proceed their day-to-day activities without really touching some form of technology are all forced to basically be able to use technology and stay away from each other in terms of play, learning, and work. And so now, because of COVID-19, national governments have enacted various acts in various jurisdictions to limit the spread of the outbreak. And the way that they do that, if you look at the diagram to your to my right, and that's probably going to be to your right also, we've seen the first portion of the diagram that looks at the decrease in mobility. Some of these legislation and acts across the globe are restricting movement of people. The advice that we get it all is, please do not go out and keep on spreading COVID-19. Stay home, do not engage in a lot of social life. And that has resulted in what we call limitation of the use of public space. And as a result, people are confined, if you look at the third diagram, confined to your home, where play and work, and really got into a point where we have isolation leading to strong reliance of technology in our everyday communication. And as we could tell, as most of us are currently aware, everybody's playing from home, everybody's working from home. With that influx of number of people adopting technology, adopting connectivity, opens itself to significant impact on cybersecurity and privacy. The more data we could create, the more data we could put online, the more activities that we could really be doing online will kind of put us into a predicament where we have to worry about how the data that has been collected, both by our organization, by other entities being protected, how much disclosure of information that we're giving out. And so what we have to look at is what are some of the current impacts on COVID-19 with respect to cybersecurity, especially with respect to the really rise in the use of information systems within our communities, everywhere within the United States and other countries. So some of the immediate impact on cybersecurity that we could think of, or immediate impact on the use of information systems, are because this really spun, or because some of the government legislation were really forced on companies, a lot of companies started asking their employees to work from home. So there was a lot of lapses in security in the initial rollout to support from home. So, for example, in some institutions, legislation went out or an act went out to say only essential workers could work, come to work. Companies were forced to let people stay home. And right off the bat, companies end up having to give people devices to work from home, or started giving people applications that they could use to connect from home. And one typical application that we are aware of was Zoom. So the lapses in security occurred in a normal environment. What normally will happen is, in a well-functioning organization, before any product or before any software or before any device is given out, the security IT team will get that application. The team will test the application to find out what is the functionality, the vulnerability, and how that particular application integrates into that particular environment. One of the things that also they get to look at it is, what are the configuration switches that could be turned on to protect the users of that particular application? So in case of, for example, of Zoom, it was rolled out and later found that a lot of the privacy and security switches that could be turned on was not turned on. So this will be a typical example of some of the lapses in security organizations had to deal with. Another lapse of security that you hear about is in most companies, they didn't have 90 or 80% of the employees working from home. So when they have bought licenses to allow workers that are remote workers to connect to the office, they bought limited of virtual VPN licenses that allow employees to connect to that organization's infrastructure securely. In cases like this, these licenses need to be upgraded. In most cases, what then will happen is that because workers need to work, there are other circumvention that will happen so that people will connect. So there were a bit of lapses of the security in the initial rollout to support work from home. And as I speak, a lot of organizations are still going through the growing pains of making sure that users could connect onto the environment securely. So these are some of the lapses of security. Another immediate impact that we started noticing is user privacy. What becomes really key here is that because everybody is in a rush, people were not asking questions. People were not asking questions regarding to devices that have been given. For example, if my organization give me a new phone to use from home, could they enable GPS location? Could they identify where I am at any given time? Can somebody in the IT team identify my home location? You know, there were privacy implications that has potential to be exploited that workers were not. So this will be some of the immediate impact that have to be thought about. Another immediate impact is we started noticing that cyber criminals saw an advantage. So it started shifting focus in engaging in type of attacks that are essentially fraudulent attacks that are essentially going to make them money, which means that they started looking to say, hey, what are some of the easier ways I could send an email to somebody to say I have a solution, or I have a medicine for COVID-19, or I have some type of equipment that's going to help you, or could ask them to give some money out. So there was an interest in focusing on really COVID-19 team attack that we started observing online. And this, as I said, COVID-19 team attacks are growing. Not only did we see bad stuff, and so for example, we had a group of cybersecurity experts, about 400, initially started about 400 of them, decide to band together, which is a good thing, to look at how they're going to help organizations, especially organizations that are into healthcare, to prevent cyber attacks that are going to be directed on them. Other than the COVID-19 CTI League, the bad guys also decided, especially the bad guys in ransomware, also decided that we don't want to attack any healthcare company. So we saw an immediate impact as a result of the influx of a lot of online connectivity going online, from the position of rollout issues with companies, users' privacy being not really cared about, which we'll say privacy became dead for a minute. The shift in cyber crimes, and looking at other people trying to come to the aid of some of these companies or some of these entities that were dealing with this. So what we kind of saw online, and this is a diagram that was put by Trend Micro. This is a cybersecurity company that looks at the type of cyber threat that have spearheaded in the midst of COVID-19. They started realizing that spam email from January 1st to March 27 was 65.7%. And in this particular case, what we mean by spam is unsolicited email that has the potential to mislead you. And within that particular spam email, there was something that I think I should bring your attention to, which is business email compromise, where these are emails that are sent and they will pretend that to the business, the attackers will pretend to the business that they are a well-meaningful companies that have been providing them service. They will write bill of lading for this particular companies, and they will extract money of it. We also started noticing the growth, according to Trend Micro, data they put out there, malware was 26.8, and these are malwares, are particular applications that are built with malicious intent to cause distraction, basically in availability of service, in compromise of confidentiality, and in integrity issues that systems have or individual users have. There are other things that we started using, that the attackers started going out there and buying an internet address, which are domain names, and buying a lot of malicious URL in order to really start either financially exploit individuals and so forth. So we could take a look at some of where related malicious online threats that were happening. We had malicious email spam, malicious files, malicious URL, and these have been growing by the day as we continue to speak. And the last time data was taken on this was March 27. What Trend Micro also started looking at is what are the target for some of these attacks? Where are the target going? And we could tell from the diagram that they put out there that about 20.8% was to the United Kingdom, which I particularly found strange. I thought the United States were going to be the one really getting a higher share of their attacks that were happening. France and Italy were both, France was 11%, approximately 11%. United States was about 8.2%. And they gave, these are the top countries that were attacks were basically taking the biggest share of the global malicious spam emails were related to COVID-19. So what are some of the challenges that organizations and individuals face with particular to COVID-19 that I could speak about? Here, some of the challenges that organizations were dealing with is how do they set up remote infrastructure and maintain and support those remote infrastructure? And as you could tell, most companies have built the systems that support their day-to-day operation based on current configuration where they could set up, we at a particular address. These are, if you take a look to the right diagram, these are the network switches that we have. These are the internal servers that we have. This is our perimeter. This is how we secure our perimeter. We have certain number of users that are remotely logging in. These users have policies that they log in to almost 90% of everybody come in and logging in from home. How do we make sure that we don't have an instances where an attacker will exploit a device of a person working from home, get on the network and cause mayhem, or get on the network and steal data? So some of the challenges organizations are still dealing with is, how do we really conduct testing? How do we know the person that's connecting to the device, that the company owned the device owned by the person, the possibility of malware? How do we check the behavior of people that are working from home? Another event is that in a normal day-to-day operations, and based on my personal experience, I can share to you that there's a lot of challenges with dealing with users that are working on site to helping them set up the environment. Now you're helping them set up the environment from home. So we're now thinking about availability issue, possibility of really making mistakes that could lead to integrity issues within that particular network. The next challenge organization we're dealing with is possible vulnerabilities and privacy concerns working from home. How do they assure users that are privacy savvy that nobody is kind of monitoring them? How do they make sure that these users don't end up using basically these devices for dual use? And what do we mean by dual use is that people end up doing things on their systems that they normally were not doing that work as a result of their home, and how does that introduce vulnerabilities? And how do they, on an ongoing basis, be able to control the devices that these users are home? So I give you a typical example. In a typical network environment, when the device is on site, organizations are able to, for example, set up at what particular point the security patches be applied to that machine. That machine is within the network. You could send the patches onto that particular machine. And what I mean by security patches are security updates that are pushed on by a particular operating system or software that's being used. Another vulnerability that they have to now contend with is if they have an antivirus software, if they have a piece of software that's protecting the computer, how do they on an ongoing basis do live meetings? So there were significant challenges affecting the way organizations supported these devices that were on site. The next challenge is that as much as we're in COVID-19, organizations are still required to deal with compliance issues. So if they have any statutory requirements, or they have to still abide by. So for example, if you're a hospital and you have to abide by HIPAA, you still have to abide. If you're a bank and you have to still abide by payment card industry, data security standard compliant, you still have to be compliant. So they have to be able to kind of navigate this with a lot of people working from home. How do they make sure that the control that they have in place within that environment that they were working with previously are still maintained in when people are now working from home. Now, what is also significant is the idea of how then the organization deal with insider threat, intellectual properties, and non-disclosure agreement that have been signed by employees. So I'll give you an example. We really don't know any worker that's working within a particular organization what their home settings are, which means that I don't know if this person just have a roommate, does have a family, a wife or a husband or a partner. We don't know the configuration. I don't know if they have an adult child. So imagine that someone signed a non-disclosure agreement that I'm not going to disclose any information I find out with this particular company. When they are at work, they are working with coworkers that have signed similar NDAs. So if somebody is walking around the office and see a particular file that's a sensitive file, they're still bounded by the NDA. Now they're working from home. So how do I know that the person working from home doesn't have a roommate that might be exposed to organization top sensitive secret? And how do I still make this available? The other thing that we have to start thinking about is that within the particular environment that we work at, organizations have put specific controls to prevent people, for example, stealing intellectual property out of that particular environment. And so an example would be that your local workstation will not allow to copy data on a USB. Now, you're home, they need access to the data to work, they could have that particular data available to. And how do you, as an organization, now start to think of innocent people that become an insider threat, which means that if somebody's working from home, the device gets taken control of by an attacker, and we are not aware, that person become an insider threat. So organizations have to deal with the challenge of insider threat, intellectual property that's being stolen, and non-disclosure agreement that have been signed that have possibly going to have to be not work in this particular instance. The other item that we have to do is how do they help their employees with the increased phishing attacks that is actually happening? And a typical example that I could give to you was a couple of days ago when I got an email to do this talk. Jen had emailed me Matt has emailed me first about this talk. And then I got a follow-up email from Jen, and I was excited about it. And then within about 2 minutes, I got an email from Bob. And the email just says, "Hey, Ben, you busy?" It's like, "Oh, that's my dean." I said, "No, I'm not busy." So I got a second reply back to say, "Hey, look, you need to, can you do me a favor?" And to give context, because I've got email from Matt and I've got email from Jen, getting an email from Bob was not really strange because for me, the context is the next level up. And my thinking was that Bob was going to ask me a question to say, "Hey, can you do this talk?" And an email that I got back to say, "Look, I'm in a meeting, I'm on a call, I can't call you. Can you, my daughter's friend is having a birthday on another line, can you basically send some money?" So being a cybersecurity expert, I started laughing and I blocked that particular user. And so how does organizations end up really ramping up on cybersecurity education to help people that are working from home so that they don't end up being a victim of phishing attacks or being a victim of specific attacks that might end up costing that particular company? And on a more critical issue, how does this particular company with internet traffic being on the rise, or with the idea that everybody is going online, how do they still maintain confidentiality, integrity, and availability for consumer-facing services and data? Everybody's at home, everybody's ordering online, everybody is interested in really doing almost every activity online. So how do we make sure that our controls that we have, our current controls could support, specifically with the issue of availability, because the load for most companies has gone up because everybody's connected online. So how does company do that? On an individual side, one is, how do I address my privacy? How do I really be upfront to make sure that, one, the devices that have been given to me by my company is not spying on me or it's not really monitoring my activities that I do? Second is not just only my company monitoring my activities, and my company by not fault of their own, might have turned monitoring on certain applications that I use to gather data. But how do I also make sure that I'm not surveilled by government? How do I make sure that the data that I'm being required to give now is not going to be used? How do I really enforce that I can make sure that any data that's gathered from me has a meaningful use? That if you don't need my name, my address to give me a service, how do I make sure that I'm also maintaining my privacy and I'm asking the right questions in the midst of COVID-19? Because of the type of event we have, a lot of people are now asking questions. The challenge is, how do I maintain my online safety? Now that everybody's going online, I'm not the only one going online. I'm going online. My 13-year-old is going online. My 6-year-old is going online. The entire family is going online. So how do I make sure that one of us within that particular home is not going to disclose certain information that will leave us vulnerable? Will leave somebody to find where we live. Will leave somebody to really be able to track activities. And how do I make sure that my children going online or myself don't get into instances such as bullying activity that might take place? The other challenge that we have to address is, how do I make sure I don't become a victim of a cybercrime? And do I know what to do if I become a victim of a cybercrime? So both organization and individual people are dealing with some of these challenges that have been introduced by COVID-19. Not only restricted to organization and individual, one of the things that we could also start looking at is the interest in espionage, right? If you look at it, every country now on earth is looking for a particular cure for COVID-19. So it will be logical step to conclude that any country will have an interest in, especially medical facilities that are doing research for different countries, to kind of try to hack into the system to find out what. So I don't want to restrict, but there's also other aspects of the challenges that are faced by countries that are in the midst of trying to look for some form of a cure for COVID-19. So these are some of the cybersecurity challenges that we're facing. Now, with challenges, what are some of the attacks that we've started noticing online is remote meeting software. And as you, most of you will be aware by now, the concept of Zoom bombing, where we've had significant number of, basically, wouldn't say these are malicious attacks, but could be classified significant number of disruptions, both in classes that are using Zoom, in meetings that are happening. Recently within town of, I suppose they were having a board meeting and an attacker jumped onto the Zoom meeting and started chanting racist attacks. So how do we, we've seen remote software being exploited, being taken advantage of. We also seen limited, extensive amount of phishing campaigns and social engineering. I just got a text message, not only online, but it's on test. I just got a text message to say, hey, Ben, do you want to please send us an email back? We want you to renew your vehicle. I want you to renew your vehicle warranty, and my vehicle doesn't have a warranty. So I didn't really bother. But we've seen a significant amount of both phishing online, on test and normal phone calls, a lot of social engineering issues that are going on. And we've seen some few attacks on medical research facilities where there was one attack in a Czech hospital where that particular Czech hospital that was doing COVID-19 related activities were attacked by an attacker. Other areas that we've also seen is disinformation and bots. And disinformation, looking at conspiracy theory, disinformation, looking at cures for COVID-19, a lot of bot activities that are happening online. And we've also seen a rise in malware attacks that are actually happening, which is really themed to commit fraud activities online. Other things that we've seen, attacks that we've started noticing, masquerading fake VPNs, mobile apps, and significant amount of domain registration. So with this, what I want to look at is what is the projection by most practitioners and some of the cybersecurity companies that are out there saying is that we are expecting that as COVID-19 continues, the number of cyber attacks against organizations and individuals is going to increase, it's going to rise. That now a lot of criminals are going to start getting into the action. So we should expect that we're going to be getting a lot of phishing emails. We're going to be getting text messages. We're going to be getting phone calls and related to COVID-19, and this is going to be on the rise. Also, this is really, our anxieties are going to be capitalized on. And this is paramount, that if our anxieties started getting capitalized on, a lot of schemes are going to be developed by the bad guys, and they're going to be continue exploiting us. We are going to see a lot of cyber criminals seeking to exploit, using a lot of different attack vectors than the one that we know, and we are advising people to protect themselves against within a short span of time. So with all this, what are some of the strategies that, from an organizational point of view and from an individual point of view, we could use to help ourselves? So some of the defense strategies, well, for organizations to start addressing information security policy gaps, specifically to COVID-19, that now a lot of the information security policies were written. For example, if you take a look at breach management, disclosure management, all these policies were written for people that are normally working within that office. What are some of the gaps that organizations have identified? What organizations have to start looking at is going through their information security policies, going through their policies, and rewriting some to cover people that are working from home, people that are working from remote areas. Second area that they could look at is really investing in secure work from home arrangements, which means that making sure that people that are working from home have received significant amount of cyber security training and have made it possible to configure machines that they're using or to configure devices that they're connecting into their network from securely. One of the things that they have to, companies have to kind of start doing is really paying attention to monitoring, paying attention to the traffic on their network, and also be able to really take a look at some of the audit logs that they have, to look at various activities that are happening within their particular company. Excuse me. And this is important because the audit, consistent review of the audit logs is going to help this particular organization to identify when there are malicious intent or there are malicious activities that are happening on the network, instead of waiting till only accessing audit logs when it's needed. They have to be a consistent review of audit logs. Companies have to now have a scheduled ongoing threat and vulnerability assessment to reassess the infrastructure that they have and access the network that they have in order to look at what are some of the vulnerabilities that they are facing. The last part that they could start looking at is how do they start implementing control using various cybersecurity principles, such as layering, where controls that are put in place to protect these information assets are staggered in such a way that it makes it harder to breach that particular control. How do they make sure that they could hide significant amount of internal resources that they have, and how do they diversify the technical control that they have in order to support work from home, in order to support the load that they have within that particular company. On an individual level, a lot of things that we could do for ourselves. One thing that we could do is to take action to ensure you have good cyber hygiene. And what do I mean by this? Is be able to, for example, do not respond to requests for emails that require your personal identifiable information to be sent on an email. If you're unsure of a particular where you get a particular email from, do not respond to it. Do not click on any links in emails. You want to limit sharing of information as much as you can. In terms of limiting the sharing of information as you can, one of the things that you have to have in mind is that anytime somebody have asked you to share information, you want to make sure that you could ask a logical question what that information is for. Is that information going to be needed to provide you the services that they're offering you? And if it's not, be really resistant and be really stringent on who you provide that particular information to and what that particular information is for. Try as much as possible to have, strong password on all your internet user accounts. Enable multi-factor authentication on the accounts that you have. And what do I mean by multi-factor authentication is that to make sure that you have dual passwords. So you have a password, which is what you know, and you also have something that you have, which means that, for example, if I log in into my bank, I'll get a code sent to my phone that allow me to log in into my bank. So from one of the actions was to look at our cyber hygiene. What are the things that we're doing to make sure that we could limit information that we give out, to make sure that we could protect the data that we have, to make sure that we could do practices that are really clean in a way that we don't open ourselves to possible threat and possible vulnerability that could be exploited in this case. Another thing as an individual person that you could start looking at is taking action to your computer and handheld devices, which means that making sure that you only connect to internet over a secure network. This internet that you're connecting to are password protected. If you're unsure who is sending you an email at the same time on your device, you don't click on it. Not to use same password for multiple services that you have, to make sure that those devices are getting, from a software perspective that are on the device, they're getting upgraded or they're getting updated with security patches as required, making sure that these devices with the type of software that you installed on, you know what type of software you installed on your computer. You just don't go out on the internet and install anything and all on your particular device to minimize it. The third action that you could take is that to take action if your personal identifiable information is compromised. And what I mean by this is, what you want to be able to do is to keep an open eye to make sure that if your personal identifiable information is compromised, you immediately will change all your password, contact the companies that are holding your information to advise them of that particular breach, and also to really get engaged and be able to get law enforcement where possible involved. The last item that I wanted to talk about is take action if you're a victim of cybercrime, is to not to be ashamed if you end up being a victim where you've sent $500 or $1,000 to somebody you're ashamed to talk about. Because once you're ashamed to talk about, that information is not going to get out, and somebody else is also going to end up being compromised. And the last one that I have here is take action to minimize surveillance or organization monitoring. If a company gives you a device and you're not using it, don't turn it on. I'm not saying all companies are doing this, but you want to make sure that you could put proactive approach to ensure that you are not surveilled. If you're not using a device, don't turn it on. If you're not using an organization, particular entity, don't really use it. So what I wanted to show you is a quick video that discusses how much information you could have out there and how that information could be used against you.
Ik zie een school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja.
Insecten.
Dat blieft?
Ik voel 2 insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenië?
Nee.
Een moto, oranje.
Pats erop.
Zenit.
Oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin, Julie de...
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
De vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is het met je spierscheur? Maison rouge, balkon, blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Het staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
9-7. Last month, you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8.
Ja.
5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, maar eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh nee. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
So thank you. So as I said to you earlier on during the talk, I said, imagine 10 years after COVID-19, you walk into your bank and you apply for credit, you get denied because somebody is living like you in California, married and divorced and bought homes and foreclosed. This is how easy your information could be out there for somebody to really leverage that information. For example, calling your bank and saying to your bank, hey, I'm John, and I've lost my bank card and I lost particular information. They ask pieces of information that they could get online. And then they start telling the bank some of the transactions that they have done. The bank send a new card. And basically somebody use all that information to create an identity. So this is a particular example. What I want to show you next on the next slide is, imagine you, I don't know if everybody uses WhatsApp here or have friends that get text message. I put a statement on my WhatsApp status to say fun stuff that I did and put a little bit URL. How easy it is for me to start collecting information about your location. So one thing I could ask everybody to do, and if you know about this already, don't do it. But if you go to iplogger.org, once you get to iplogger.org, if I want to send you an URL that allows me to kind of identify your position where you currently are located, it's pretty much easy. So once you've gone to iplogger.org, what I want you to do is click on the invincible image, which is the one in the middle. Once you click on that, what you will see on your screen is a screen such as what is on right now. And the screen that's on, what we have here is that you have IP logger link for collecting statistics, which means that collecting information on anybody that will click on the link that I've provided out. And basically the second one looks at selecting the domain name that I want to use out as if I want to disguise it as anonymous. And then the third one looks at, the IP address that could be. So once you've got there, if you copy that first link and you send it to anyone, and they click on that particular link, what it will allow you to see, or if you click on any link that you don't know, what it will allow you to see is it will allow you to see something like this. First, you're going to get information from the user back that tells you what the IP address, what is the internet address of the person, the computer address that they're using, and it also tells you the country that you're located in, and give you an idea the device that person is using, and what is more interesting, give you some idea, an approximation on where this particular person is located. So if you want to test that for yourself, you copy the link, you click on that link, and then basically you get to dig deeper. So I want to kind of find out more information where you click the link from. I go in and I could locate you that you are in the United States. Further, I could actually, if you look at your right, I could expand the map, right? So this is when I told you that earlier on during the talk that imagine that I meet you on campus and we met a couple of times and I tell you, I could find out where you spend most of your time by just exchanging few information with you and allow you to click on the link. This will be a typical link that you've clicked on, that usually you click a link and nothing shows up, you're going to forget it, but somebody could gather that amount of information about you. So be careful on what type of links that you click. The second thing I want to show you is that we talked about two-factor authentication. And so I wanted to kind of tell you the importance of two-factor authentication. So if you look at, this is a typical mobile, this is my phone. So the mobile services that you have, and I didn't put the name on there with the fear of somebody coming back to me. And with this particular login screen that you see for the user to enter their phone number and then 4-digit PIN, right? So what is interesting within this particular 4-digit PIN is that it doesn't have lockout on multiple failed attempt. So somebody could easily, if you don't have a dual two-factor authentication, could easily log in onto your phone, log in onto the phone's account with a multiple combination of 4-digit, get access to that particular phone, go in there, and basically swap your SIM, which is, I don't know if you get SIM swapping. This is where an attacker is able to actually swap your SIM so that your phone number stops working at your end, and the new phone that you have activated start working. So in this particular case, assuming that I don't have dual two-factor authentication on my phone get breached, the first place the person goes is trying to find out some of my possible online banking information. And in that particular case, some of the banks might just use a username, which is normally will be email address that people have set up. So some of these things, the reason why you want to set up some two-factor authentication is how easy it is to start aggregating information to really commit an identity theft or to commit such a fraud activities. The next thing I want you to kind of take home will be, usually a lot of time we hear about people's password and email address and so forth. So one of the things that you could do after this talk today is to find out if your password that you have has been compromised before, or if the email address that you use has been part of a particular breach that has occurred, which means that has been part of information that's actually out there with your username and password. And the site that you could visit in this particular case is looking at haveibeenpawned.com. And once you get there, you enter, for example, so what I did was I entered the old email address I used to use. I entered that email address, and it indicated to me that that particular email address was part of an Adobe breach that occurred in 2012 because I've signed up an account with Adobe. So imagine that if I was using only one password for all my accounts, and that password has been breached, and somebody have that password and username, they're gonna start running automated tools to various services to see if they could log in. So with it, this is the end of the talk. Thank you very much.